When learning fighting games, it's common to reach a point where sometimes you'll completely run over your opponents, but in others, you never seem to be able to land a hit. Why does this happen? And what can we do to alleviate the problem? You might recognize these two opponents. There are the Kais, who seem to block everything you throw at them. And then there's the Souls, who abuse their kicks to interrupt you or blow through your offense with invincible reversals at any opportunity they get. The likelihood is, most opponents you face are not absolute monsters who deeply understand how to play efficiently in every situation they're put in. It's that your default playstyle matches up better against one of these types of players and fares worse against the other. Your game plan inadvertently ends up one-dimensional because it lacks intentionality. That is, you're not aware of what options are available to you, what they offer in terms of risk and reward, and you're not consciously choosing your actions based on the context of the game. Today, we're going to learn 4 very basic offensive options you should consciously choose every time you attack your opponent: Blockstrings, frame traps, mix-ups, and pressure resets. Today, we'll learn what each of these options are for, and how they're meant to be used together to create basic yet well-rounded strategies to beat the Kais, the Souls, and everyone in between. This is Millennium, and these are the gaps in the armor. Fundamentally, there are 2 things that get in the way of opening up the opponent. In Kai's case, the problem is that he doesn't press enough buttons. To open the Kais up, we have to create situations where the best way to escape is do something aside from block. Soul has the opposite problem. He presses too many buttons. To stop the Souls from cutting our offense short, we need to create situations where attacking either gets punished or is nearly impossible to begin with. Our plan involves 3 aspects: the situation we want to replicate, the action that we want to dissuade, and the subsequent punishment for that action. How effective we are in forcing our opponents to change the way they play will depend on how reliably and severely we can punish their behavior. This process is called conditioning. Even though variables like meter, health, stage positioning, burst, and other resources can change how opponents behave, today we'll create a situation in the most basic way possible. As Giovanna, we'll focus on what happens after opponents have blocked a close S. That being said, all of the things that I'll teach you today can be applied to any character, and for the most part, you can use anyone else's close S the same way. It's important to remember that even if we've successfully conditioned an opponent to behave a certain way after blocking close S, there's no guarantee they'll view blocking a different move, like a 5k or 2p, the same way. And we'll have to repeat the process for those situations too. Let's start with how to condition the Souls. For better or for worse, we need to learn to deal with invincible reversals first. In Strive, there are only 2 ways to universally punish reversals. If we're feeling confident one will come after our close S, we can grab the opponent out of its startup. But otherwise, we have to preemptively cut off our own offense early in anticipation of one. Then, if it happens, we can block it and punish our opponent. Doing nothing is not exactly the most exciting thing, but it's just as important as anything else we'll learn today. Now, let's take a look at the first thing we can do: Blockstrings. A blockstring is a sequence of moves that can't be interrupted. No matter what buttons the opponent tries to push while we perform one, if they block the first hit, they'll continue to block until the very end. Blockstrings help us gain some stage space, build some meter, increase our opponent's risk gauge, and do some chip damage, while also safely disengaging us from the interaction. Ideally, the sequence ends with a move that's either safe or hard to punish on block due to pushback. 214K is the go-to ender for Giovanna. For someone like Kai, 214S might work for this purpose. If Soul is insistent on carelessly mashing at this distance, they could set themselves up for a whiff punish. That being said, Blockstrings don't exactly teach Soul to stop mashing. They simply prevent him from doing so. For all we know, he could still be trying to furiously kick during our Blockstring. So how do we condition him to stop attacking completely? This is where our second tool comes in: frame traps. A frame trap is a sequence of moves that intentionally has a gap in it. This gap, as the name suggests, is a way to bait Soul into pressing a button. His attack will start to come out, but won't activate fast enough to hit us, and he'll get counter hit instead. The size of the gap in frame traps are dependent on the moves themselves. For example, a 5k 214k will counter hit Soul's 5k, but a 2p 214k won't. One method of creating frame traps that works with every character is to simply delay moves that Gatling into each other. By delaying our input slightly, we can turn any true Blockstring sequence into a frame trap. We can frame trap between close S and far S, between far S and 5H, and between 5H and 214K. It's not uncommon for characters, especially aggressive ones, to not have decent true block strings. An Anji staple, close S, 2S, 5H Fuji Nagiha looks like a true block string, but it actually has a natural frame trap between 2S and 5H. The same is true with Leo. It's common to see 3 sword swings before he does 236S, but there's a natural gap when he goes from far S to 5H. These gaps, like in any frame trap, come with a risk. Any gap whatsoever is enough to fit an invincible reversal in, and if we find our opponents like to do that, we'll have to revert to our prior tactics of throwing or defending early. Although defending early and Blockstrings might have a hard time incentivizing the souls of the world to stop mashing by themselves, the threat of a frame trap along with them just might. With that, we figured out what to do if we're being aggressed on, but how do we condition the players who are too defensive, the Kais? For them, let's introduce our third tool, the mix-up. For our purposes, a mix-up is when we force the opponent to guess between 2 or more things we can do, and if they guess wrong about which one to defend, we can cash out on our gamble and do some damage. All characters have a built-in mix-up. 5D is always an overhead. 2D is always a sweeping low. Generic throws are available to everyone too. So from close S, we can do an overhead, a low, or we can walk up slightly and throw. If we want to get extra cheeky, we could even charge up 5D for a massive combo. Giovanna even has a special, 214S, that can be used as a mix-up. It can hit both on the same side, or cross up. Others, like Chip, have command grabs with long reach, or command normal overheads without the obvious orange glow of 5D. It's rare that mix-ups in Strive are true, meaning that opponents are forced into blocking them without being able to act. And that means that many times, a mix-up's risk-reward ratio can be turned on its head by mashing or using movement like backdashing or jumping. In other words, we can incentivize Kai to do something that isn't block. That being said, it's not always in our best interest to potentially give up our turn by getting a mix-up blocked. Sometimes, it's better to delay the end of our pressure instead. And for that, we have our last tool, pressure resets. There are usually fairly standard places where your offense might end. But pressure resets, as the name implies, take a risk to restart pressure either from the beginning or somewhere in the middle. A common example is close S, walk forward into close S. Some moves even let you restart your pressure with an advantage. Giovanna has one such special, 236K. It's slow and interruptible, but on block leaves you close with some frame advantage, creating the opportunity to frame trap the opponent. Soul's far S into far S is also an infamous pressure reset tactic. And so instead of the opponent knowing that they'll get their turn back if they wait, we threaten them with the possibility of a never-ending offense. Even the most stubborn of Kais won't want to block forever waiting for the rest of a block string that will never come. They'll instead mash to stop it from happening. By this time, you might have noticed something interesting. Conditioning Soul out of his habits means he blocks more. Conditioning Kai out of his habits means he attacks more. The line between who plays in what way begins to blur. In reality, the players you face won't be complete Kais or complete Souls. They'll have some Kai qualities and some Soul qualities, and even those tendencies will change according to the conditioning you do too. Blockstrings and frame traps condition players to play more defensively. Mix-ups and pressure resets condition players to play more offensively. The dance between respecting your opponent and disrespecting them, playing offensively and defensively, getting the right read on your opponent, and bending their behavior to your will is a big part of what makes fighting games so rewarding and so fun. Offense is just one sliver of the entirety of these types of games, but I hope today you'll have learned some new tools to more consciously interact with this one part. Thanks for watching. Until next time, this was Millennium.